it is my pleasure to welcome Jaeyoung to give us a talk today. Jaeyoung is a fifth-year PhD student at Penn State University, working with Kenneth Huang. He does a lot of. He also did two internships at different teams at MSR. He is an interdisciplinary researcher who does a lot of cool work at the intersection of HCI and NLP. Many of his recent work are really relevant to scientific scholars, such as creative writing, scientific writing, and scientific figure captioning. So, Jan, why don't you take it away?
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Okay, so let me start my talk. Yeah, hello, everyone. So today I'm going to talk about my work toward intelligent writing support beyond completing sentences. Yeah, and again, I'm Jaeyoung. I'm currently a last year PhD candidate at Penn State University. And yeah, I work a lot on the intersections of both NLP and HCI. And I publish papers in both of the areas. But like, what am I actually working on? So a major portion of my work is actually on the creative writings. So we have a system called Heteroglossia, where we try to provide some inspirations or ideas to writers when they don't know what to write next. Yeah, and I have some other works on scientific writings. So, for example, the scientific figure captionings, or we also try to use explainable AI to provide some feedback for writers. I mean, basically to help them to write abstract. Yeah, and other than that, I have some other works on data annotations or language learnings. And in today's work, I will focus on the creative writing and also scientific writings. Yeah, and let's start with the scientific writing part. Here, I will introduce the work scientific figure captioning. So yeah, this is a work we collaborated with Adobe Research. And yeah, so why are captions so important? So when people read papers, we usually go through the abstract, and probably we will scan some of the figures, right? And right now, I mean, when we scan the figures, I mean, the captions will be very important for us to quickly understand the message that these particular figures want to express, right? And however, from some of our preliminary annotations, we found that there are a lot of bad captions. And in fact, over like 54% of the captions in NLP domain on archive is not helpful at all. So for example, if you look at the figures on the left-hand side here, the captions tell us this is the SALU activation functions. I mean, of course, if you know SALU, you know what that means, right? But if you don't know about that, this figure, I mean, these captions doesn't really explain anything. So it cannot help you to understand what these figures want to say, right? So from the reader's perspective, this is actually a really bad captions. And on the right-hand side here, we have another figures, and it is about the effect of the temperature. Yeah. And in the captions, you can see that it basically tell you like what will happen if you have high temperatures or low temperatures. Yeah. And from here, you can see that, I mean, you can actually understand the takeaway message of these particular figures, right? So this is the, I mean, compared to these figures, this is like relatively better captions we can see, right? So here we want to know like what can we help? Like can we help both readers and writers? Like for example, for readers, can we actually generate better captions to help them quickly go through the papers? And for writers, can we provide some feedback for them? I mean, or can we actually generate better captions for them so that they can use those higher quality captions in their paper directly? So yeah, can we automatically generate captions to help? In one of our work, I mean prior work, we tried, we collect the data from archive, yeah, and we actually try vision to language models. However, as you can see, I mean, it doesn't really work. So the blue score here is like pretty low. It's like 2%, around 2%. And the generated captions is it's not helpful for us to understand the figures, right? So yeah, what happened? Like why are those models so bad? Like so bad. I mean, vision to language models works pretty well in other domains, right? So yeah, what happens? We found that scientific figures do not actually provide enough information and context for us to generate the captions. So taking this figure as the example, like I mean, it basically, I mean, the takeaway message tell us like high temperature will affect the text, lower temperature will also affect the text. However, can we actually see that on the figures? I mean, we don't really know the context, right? We know this is the similarities, but what does that actually means? I mean, we don't have any context for us to generate the takeaway message. So yeah, where is the information? How can we get the information we need? So indeed, the information is presented in the papers. I mean, to verify that, we run an analysis. We basically do the alignment between the captions and the figure mentioning paragraph. And the figure mentioning paragraph here basically refers to the paragraph that that mentions the figures. For example, like figure 2, blah blah blah, figure 3, blah blah. So we run an Olsen alignment here to get the mappings between the captions and the paragraph. So we will get something like this, and from that, we know like which tokens from the captions map to the which tokens on the paragraph, right? So by having this, we can actually calculate like where the information came from, right? So yeah, as you can see, like 75% of the captions, I mean, of the tokens from captions can actually be identified in a paragraph. So that means a lot of information is actually in the paper itself. Right. So yeah, this is actually a summarization task. Yeah. So we reformulate the whole task. And right now, given a scientific paper and the target figures, we can first identify or extract all the mentions to that particular figures. And then after that, we can run summarization models to, to actually to generate a better quality of the caption. Yeah. So after we have that new framework, like what makes it still so difficult? I mean, if you remember, in our data, there are a huge portion of of the captions are bad captions, right? So I mean, that actually influence a lot of things. Like when we want to train the models, how can we actually train a model to generate good captions if we have a lot of bad captions in our training set, right? And how can we properly evaluate the result or evaluate the models if the testing set contains a lot of bad captions? So, I mean, the bad captions actually influence a lot of things and make this task a lot more difficult. Yeah. So in the following, in the next part of the talk, I will, I mean, in this paper, we actually try to solve these problems a little bit, and yeah, I will show you later. So in our experiment settings here, we use the SciCap summarization data set, and that's actually a subset of the archive data set. Yeah. And yeah, we provide several benchmark. So for example, here we have the reuse baseline, which basically output the input. Yeah. So and we try out the mention and paragraph. And for for the summarization task, we basically fine-tune pixels, and we also try like putting different input. And for example, we have mentioned paragraph, OCR, and like different combinations. And here we have, we also try one of the models with a better tag here. And the better here is actually we want to try to do some of the data control on the training set. Yeah, so here we remove captions that are shorter than 30 tokens. So we basically remove short captions, and because we believe that longer captions are usually better, and this is actually supported by some of the prior work. Yeah, so here we actually try a very naive way, a very simple way to control the data, and we want to see if we can actually improve the model. Yep. And last, we also have the vision to language models. Here we try two different things. We have the TROCR, which is essentially an OCR model. And we also try to put together the byte vision encoder and the GPT-2 together to from this vision to language model. Yeah, and before I step into the performance or the tables, I want to emphasize that the lens normalization is very important actually. So here, what does the lens normalization means? So here you can see this is actually the figures of of Rouge 2 here, and we actually draw all the performance on these figures. With respect to the lens. And let's focus on the dashed line here. That's actually the random baseline. Yeah. And as you can see, uh, Rouge 2 actually favor longer text. And this is shown by the dashed line here. If you have longer captions, you can actually get higher Rouge 2 score. So we want to remove that dependency on the lens. So that's why we need to do these lens normalizations. And the way we did this is actually pretty simple. So we basically divide the scores by the random score at that particular lens. So after the normalizations, you can see the random baseline will be a straight lines. And yeah, we kind of move a little bit the other point around these figures. Yeah. So does the summarization actually works? Let's look at the normalization scores here. So yeah, first, Pixar's model with a paragraph plus OCR actually performs the best. So you can see the yellow block here. It actually, this one actually has the highest scores. And we also found that Pixar's with better quality, with data quality control, does not perform that good. Yeah, and this is actually because the testing set, the distribution, the data distribution of the training set and testing set is actually different, right? So, in the testing set, we still have a lot of low quality data, low quality captions here. So that's probably the reason why this is, the numbers here is not very good. Yeah. And basically, the two vision to language models do not work properly. The score is pretty low. Yeah, but yeah, the testing set is kind of bad, right? So how can we actually solve this problem? So right now we still run human evaluations to verify the performance. So yeah, here we try two different human evaluations. The first one is the MTurk study. Yeah, and as you know, quant workers doesn't really have the background in scientific domains, right? So here instead of asking qual workers to select the best one, we actually ask them to select the worst one. Yeah. So if you look at the voting here, so you can see TROCR actually has the highest votings, it is significantly higher than the other baselines in terms of majority votings or average vote. Yeah. So we kind of confirm that TROCR or the vision to language model doesn't work in this problem. And in our formal human evaluations, where we recruit PhD students with the backgrounds to rank the quality or to rank the helpfulness of the captions. The result is here, but here we actually remove the TROCR models to make the overall task easier. Yeah, and as you can see, the caption is still the ground truth caption is still the best. Yeah, but the Pixar's model with the data control, with the better data here, the score is actually pretty similar. Pretty close to the caption, to the ground truth. Yeah, so these tell us that with a very even with a very simple data control, quality control strategies, we can actually largely improve uh, the performance here of the performance of the models. So that's basically the right way to go. Yeah, and after that, we also want to know what actually makes a good captions, right? So we conduct a quality annotations for around 400 different figures in the NLP domains. Yeah. And here we annotate 4 different things. The first one is image text, whether the captions contain the like XY labels or the titles, legend. Yeah. And the next one, we also annotate visual descriptions. And the visual descriptions here refers to the, for example, like red line, blue line, the shape of the curve, or something like that. Yeah. And we also annotate whether there is a takeaway message in the caption or not. Yeah. And then the last one, helpfulness. This is from basically from the reader's perspective, whether this is helpful captions for readers to understand the meaning behind the figures. Yeah. And the annotation result from the annotation result here, you can see that a lot of captions are not helpful, right? They I mean, like only 46% of them are actually helpful for readers. And a lot of captions only have the image tags, like especially XY labels, yeah, and only like very few of them has the visual descriptions or takeaway message. Yeah. And if we look at the Pearson correlation table here, we can see the helpfulness, or I mean, what makes a good captions, and it's actually highly related to the takeaway message and also the visual descriptions. And in turn, if we talk about the lens, it is like moderately correlated. And the result here basically tell us that the takeaway message is probably the most important component of the captions. And the visual descriptions is also very important. But our current method, like summarization approach, probably cannot handle the visual description because we don't have the information from the figures, right? So it also suggests that in the future, we will probably need to do like multi-modal models to, to improve the model. So yeah, what's next about this project? So the first thing we can probably do in the future is to use quality annotation data to improve the model, right? So for example, I mean, here we basically defined what is a good captions, and can we use those informations to help the model to generate good captions? And something that we can try is like human feedback for reinforcement learning or something like that. Yeah. And other things we can try for this project is like, can we actually deploy the system to support both readers and writers? I think for readers, it is probably easier, right? So we can allow readers to upload a PDF version of the papers, and we can do some parsing on the papers and then suggest like the new or the higher quality captions for readers. But for writers, what is the best way for writers? I mean, because they still need to edit the result, right? So like we don't really know what is the best way to help for writers, but I believe this is something we can try. Like we can basically try to build an interface for that and see how we can help. Yeah. And the other thing that we can do in the next step is also like, can we actually use the current method to generate alternative tags? And right now, alternative tags is like more and more important for people's, right? And can we actually use the same framework to generate alternative tags? And if not, what information is missing? Like probably we need like data tables to generate like better alternative tags, right? But I mean, even if we have that, is that enough, or is there anything we need? Yeah. So yeah, that's all about this the scientific figure captioning project. Like, do you have any questions? I mean, yeah, and if you have questions, you can let me know, or you can ask in the end of the talk. Okay, so yeah, so let me talk about the next part. So next part, I want to share some of the work in the creative writings. Yeah, and well, yeah, I mean, compared to scientific writings, I mean, I focus a lot on the creative writings, and a lot of work I did is actually focused on the ideations. So we try to generate a lot of ideas to writers so that they know what to write when they get stuck. And I think that's probably, I mean, in scientific writings, we probably don't need a lot of ideations, right? So in scientific writings, I mean, when we are about to write the papers, I mean, we actually knows about everything. I mean, usually the project is kind of done, right? So we kind of know everything we want to express. So I mean, yeah, there are some difference between creative writing and scientific writings. Yeah, but in our study of the creative writing, we actually find something that can apply to the scientific writings. So yeah, I will talk about that later. Yeah. So the first paper I want to introduce is the Heteroglossia, and this is a paper published in CHI 2020. Yeah. So in this paper, the thing that we want to solve is called writer's block. And writer's block is a phenomenon that writers get stuck in the middle of the writing, and they basically don't know what to write next. So a simple way to solve this is actually to provide a lot of ideas, basically a lot of ideas to continue the story and see which one actually help the writers. So that's why we have this prototype system called Heteroglossia. And as our first attempt, we built Heteroglossia as a Google Doc add-on. So you can see this is the system, and yeah, this is the Google Doc. So writers can write in the Google Doc, and when they need support, they can select a piece of the text and then use our system, which is in the sidebar here, use our system to generate or to retrieve some of the ideas. Yeah, and here we take the crowdsourcing approach with a role play strategy, and that means we basically ask workers to imagine that they are one of the characters in the story, and we ask them to think about what they might do next. Yeah. So after we collect those ideas, we will inject those ideas as the comment like this. So yeah, let's look at the quick demo of the system. Yeah. So yeah, first we have this like character managing page for writers. So writers can create new characters or manage their characters in the stories here. And in the descriptions, writers can provide, like for example, like personalities or the inner goal, outer goal of the characters. And later, when we ask workers to role play the characters, we will actually provide those information. Yeah. And here, this is the interface of the Heteroglossia. So to use Heteroglossia, you need to select a piece of the text from your draft, and we will actually provide those as the context for workers. Yeah. And you can see here that's the after you select the text, you need to select a team, and a team is essentially a group of characters. And we actually have another page, but we didn't show it here. Yeah, and of course you can provide some of the instructions to workers. Yeah, and after you create the task, a bot will join the Google Doc and then create the first comment here, and later we will inject all the ideas as the comment for this first comment. So so yeah, this is the comment. This is the ideas we get. Yeah. So for example, here you can see this is the role. This is the role play for the sirens, and here are what sirens might do next. And this is the role play for the dead daughters. So yeah, that's the videos. That's how the Heteroglossia work. Yeah. And through our small scale user study, we actually get positive feedback. Yeah, but the problem of this system is that the latency is actually very high, and because we use the crowdsourcing method, and so it actually takes a lot of time to get the response. And in this activity logs, you can see, I mean, after the user requests the ideas, it actually takes around like 20 or 30 minutes to get the first response from workers. So yeah, we are thinking about like, is there any way we can automate the whole process? Yeah, so that comes to our second work on it. So here the paper is called Language Model as a Voice. And yeah, this paper is still under review. And in this system, we build a system called Inspo. And here we provide 4 different functions to allow writers to retrieve ideas. Yeah, the first one is the crowd power ideations. And it's actually different from the Heteroglossia. So here we did not actually employ the role play strategy. We just ask workers to provide the ideas. Yeah, and the next one, story plot generations. This is actually a function, a model from one of our prior work. Yeah, and basically the idea is we fine tune the GPT-2 models to generate a plot. Yeah, and the plot is essentially, you know, a 3-sentence summary of what might happen next. Yeah. And we also we also provide 2 GPT-3 models. And the first one is the GPT-3 plot generations. Here we use the prompt, describe the follow-up story arc using 50 words. And yeah, we use these to ask GPT-3 to generate the plot ideas. And the last one is basically the GPT-3 paragraph completion. So we did not use any prompt. We just asked GPT-3 to finish the paragraph. Okay, so let me show the system of the inspo here. Yeah, so this is the inspo systems. So yeah, in the dashboard, you can access to the all the previous documents, or you can also create your own like new document here. Yeah, and let's click on this one. So for inspo, we actually build our own editors. So instead of building add-on on Google Doc, here we want to own an editors. And the good thing about that is we can actually keep all the writing logs from the writers. And that's very helpful for us to analyze uh, what happens or what writers actually did on the interface. Yeah. So yeah, this is the editors. Yeah, and we also have a sidebar. This will shows all the previous inspiration tasks. Yeah, so if we click on that, it will basically bring you to the ideas that you want to support. Yeah. Yeah. And if you look at this is actually the ideation panels or the inspiration panels. Yeah. So you will see the ideas or inspirations generated by the functions. Yeah. And here, this is the GPT-3 paragraph completion functions. Yeah. So you can go through each of them. Yeah. And if you are not happy with that, you can actually click a button here, get another plot to ask the model to generate another plot for you. So yeah, and yeah, so you can see we get the next plot here, and yeah, it's basically try to complete your paragraph. And if you want to generate new ideas or initiate a new task, again, you need to select a piece of text from your draft and then click this Get Inspired buttons. Yeah. So yeah, and here we provide 4 functions. So you need to select one of the functions to use. And yeah, let's try the GB3 plot ideations. Yeah, and yeah, let's skip the instruction here and just create the task. So yeah, you can see this is the newly created inspiration task. Yeah, and if you click on it, it will bring you to the context of this inspiration task. And if you are not satisfied with this, you can get another plot. So yeah, that's basically how inspo work. Yeah. Okay. And So yeah, let's come back to the slide. So after we have the systems, we conduct a deployment studies with a participant, and these participants are with like different levels.
Jay, are you
Yep.
supposed to be showing the slides or still seeing the demo?
Slide.
Right now we're seeing the demo though.
Okay. Okay. Let me try this again. Like, is it still the demo?
It is still the demo.
Okay. Let me do this again. How about now?
Still the demo.
Still demo. Like, okay, let me share my screen again. Okay. Okay. How about now?
Yep. Now we're seeing the slides.
Okay,
Thanks.
great. Yeah. So yeah, after we get the after we have the inspo systems, we conduct the deployment study with a different participant, and these participants are with like different levels of writing experience. Yeah, and in the study, we ask each of the participants to write 2,000 word story within a week. Yeah, and after they finish the stories, we conduct a semi-structured interview to understand their feedback. Okay, yeah. So yeah, after they finish that, we actually first we want to know like how do inspo actually influence the writings. So here we did the analysis on the writing log. Yeah, so we calculate the similarity between the inspirations and the added content. Yeah, so yeah, the similarity is like this. So you can see the GB3 like auto completion or paragraph completions actually has the highest similarities. So that means some of the writers actually use some of the generated text in their story directly. Yeah, and compared to the GB3 completions, like GB2 models, I mean the AI plot models actually has the lowest scores. So that means probably some of the ideas are too vague or not actually helpful for them. Yeah. Okay. So one thing that we got from the interview is that we found that participants will actually use language models to learn and negotiate with the conventions. But like, what does that mean? What does convention means? So to understand that, I want to introduce the like discourse community theory. And so discourse community theory, I mean, discourse community is basically a group of people who share the same goals, values, and they will use a certain type of language to communicate with each others. So for example, HCI community is a discourse community, and we can also have like NLP community that is also a discourse communities. And discourse community theory actually tell us that the reason we want to write things is actually we want to find a way to participate in the discourse communities. Yeah. So when we write the articles or when we write anything, we actually want to know about the conventions of that particular discourse communities, and we want to learn the goals or the values of that discourse communities. Yeah. So for example, P4 basically told us that like I want this to be XYZ. Where should I go now? So essentially, P4 is trying to learned the expectations of a particular discourse community, right? So people want to confirm, I mean, which is the best way to go. Yeah, and in P14 also tell us that essentially to see if what I was saying made sense to them or what they were thinking was happening. So yeah, again, P14 is trying to learn the expectations or the values for a certain discourse communities, and yeah, that's how people And that's one of the interesting way that people or the participant will actually use language models to do. And I think this is actually very important for scientific writings, right? So, for example, right, when we write the papers, we need to identify what is the target audience, what is the discourse community that we want to participate, right? So, for example, I work on both NLP and HCI, and sometimes for the same project, I can submit the papers to both NLP and HCI conference, right? But and when I write the papers, I need to consider the discourse community, the target audience, and I need to learn about what they actually cares about, and then modify or revise my draft accordingly. So that's how discourse community can be used in scientific writings. Yeah, and here we also found that people also use that in creative writing, and I think that's interesting to explore. Yeah, and here we also, from our interviews, we also identify some of the common use case or concerns. Like, for example, people will use our systems to get language suggestions or get some inspirations, and they do have concerns about the bias or how to claim the authorship if they actually use the AI to generate some of the content. So what's next? What can we do next after we finish the project? So one thing that we can probably do is to try to close the gap between the human expectations and language models. So I think this is in particular very important for the bias problem here. Yeah. So sometimes when people want the language model to generate something, or they want to learn some conventions about like whether this is the right way to go. I mean, sometimes the language model does not reflect their thinkings, or did not actually reflect the target audience or target discourse communities. So how can we actually control that? I mean, right now we don't really have a good answer for that, but I think that's an interesting way to explore. And also, like, what's the difference between creative writing and scientific writings? I mean, I did a lot of creative writings, and these experience? Can I actually apply those experience to scientific writings? And for like discourse community theories, we can actually do a lot of things with that, right? And that can actually explain a lot of things in scientific writings. Like, can we actually build things to support that? Yeah, those are things that I would be interesting to do next. Yeah, and here are some of my other work that I also accomplished. So I have some work, for example, here I built an interface to support annotations, and here I basically designed some of the method to select select the best materials for language learnings. And this one is the Code-19 dataset, and I want to quickly introduce the Code-19 dataset actually. Yeah. So in Code-19 dataset, we basically try to annotate the research aspect for the sentence in the scientific abstract. So for example, we have the background, purpose, method findings, and others. And in these papers, we only focus on how to annotate the research aspect. However, I believe the research aspect is actually very helpful for both writers and readers. Like, for example, if we analyze the relationship between method and findings, we can probably generate a lot of things. Like, we can probably understand what is the pros and cons for a certain method, right? And that will be very helpful for readers. And for writers, I mean, this structure feedback can probably provide some support or feedback for writers. And for example, in the NLP papers, these structure will they will probably favor some type of the structures. And for HCI conference, I mean, the structure might be slightly different, but how can we actually understand that and provide feedback for writers? I think that's something we can do. We can explore with these Code-19 dataset. Yeah, and here I want to quickly talk about some of my research plan, if I have if I join the Semantic Scholar. So yeah, I still want to do writing support, and I think writing support is very important for people. I mean, writing is itself is actually very important, but it is a very demanding task, and it takes a lot of time to do. Yeah, and right now we have two theories to explain to explain the writings. So for example, we have the cognitive process of writings, where we have that it basically tells us that there are three main functions of the writings, right? So we have the planning, we have the translating or reviewing, and that's the on the cognitive side. Yeah, and in the social aspect, we also have the discourse community theory. Discourse community theory tells us that uh, the goal of the writing is actually to participate the community, and to participate that or to improve your writings, you need to learn the goal or the values of your target communities. And then you probably also need to learn some of the conventions, like what language they will use, what genres they will usually use. Yeah, those are from the social aspect of the writing. Yeah, and I want to support writings in different ways. Yeah, and yeah, so what can I bring? I mean, a lot of my works actually focus on the creative writings, right? And it's actually on the planning side, where we try to generate a lot of ideas for writers to to negotiate the directions of the story, or to think about the values they want to say. Yeah, and that's probably not very important for scientific writings, because when we are about to write the papers, of course, we know we know everything about the project, right? So the ideation is probably not very useful here. But for scientific writings, the translation is probably the most important part. So because we need to learn how to how to present the same thing in different format or in different conventions, and it's actually very relevant to the discourse communities. Like we need to identify the target audience and what is the best way, to actually write things in that under that conventions. Yeah, and compared to the reviewing process in these two different type of writings, because the target, the expectation is actually different. So for scientific writings, we probably care a lot more about the conventions, for example, like the structures, or whether this is a like a very whether you actually clarify everything in your writings, right? And in a creative writings, probably the interestingness is the most important things for writers. Yeah. So yeah, what can we actually do to support like different part of the process? Yeah, like for the planning, this will, I mean, the project here will probably happens before before the project is, I mean, before we actually work on the project. But I believe it is, I mean, to understand the goal of the values to a certain community is something we can try. Yeah. And also, like, can we actually discuss our thought with like language models, like uh, using and discussing with language model, even if the language models only generate bad ideas, can that still helpful? Can that still be helpful for us to understand what we are thinking? Right? These are things related to the planning stage. And yeah, of course, in the translating part, like how can we query language models, or how can we tune the language models? I mean, so that we can, when we need it, we can actually access to the target discourse communities. Like, should we design different prompt, or should we actually fine tune the models? Yeah, and what's the best way to help? I mean, right now, ChatGPT actually, and ChatGPT is a like conversational user interface, right? I mean, is that the best way to help writings, or should we have like rewriting buttons, or like what can we do? Like, I mean, there are a lot of things we can explore, and yeah, I mean, to be honest, I don't really know what is the best way to do this, but I believe there are a lot of things we can try. Yeah, and also the scientific figure captioning project, it is essentially part of the translating process, right? So we have the figures, which means we actually have some information that we want to express in mind, right? But what is the best way to to express those message using language? I mean, that's the things we can do, and of course, we need to consider the discourse communities like captions in NLP domain or in HCI domains will probably look differently, right? So how can we design a system to do that? That's something I want to do next. Yeah, and in terms of the reviewing part, yeah. So yeah, I mean, of course, can we actually do something? Can we actually provide feedback using the Coda 19 dataset? And Coda 19 dataset right now is only focused on the abstract, but I believe we can extend it to the introduction, related work, and other part of the papers. And if we can provide that, we can let people know like which part is actually missing or which part they need to which part need more focus, right? And yeah, of course, again on the scientific figure captioning part, yeah, can we actually provide some feedback to help writers? Like, I mean, right now we have the definition of good captions. Can we tell the writers that I mean the current captions does not actually have the takeaway message or the description of the visual? I mean, if we provide those feedback, does it actually help? Yeah, those are things that we can do, and I would like to do and explore in the future. Yeah. So yeah, that's all about my talk. And yeah, if you have any questions, please let me know.
Great. Let's thank Jae for his talk, and we have a couple minutes for questions.
I had a question, Joseph.
Hi.
Go for it.
Hi. Great talk. Some really interesting ideas. I was curious. So I thought it was really interesting how you were mentioning the discourse community and kind of the idea of writing to a particular audience and, for example, writing to an HCI or an NLP audience and potentially helping LLMs do this. What would you, if you had to make a guess, or like what do you think would be your first step in applying that theory to either prompting LLMs or just building out a support tool for scientific writers?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. So from our system right now, the inspo system, I mean, yeah. So in our inspo systems, right now we only ask people to select a piece of the, I mean, basically the draft, and we can use large language models to to complete the sentence, right? And I believe, like, for example, the rewriting is probably something we can do. Like, you can write a draft, or you have some rough ideas about what you want to express. And after you write that, you can actually ask large language models to rewrite your draft into different form, right? And but yeah, I mean, of course, like how do we decide the like the prompt, or should we actually provide some of the example draft? I think that's I mean, a lot of things we can try. And yeah, as the first step, I will probably try to provide some of the draft from the target discourse communities. Like, for example, you are writing a NLP papers, and we can probably put some of the relevant like NLP papers, I mean, part of the content as the in a prompt to provide some of the examples to language models. And I think that will probably be the first step I try to apply this method.
Awesome. Thank you.
I guess I have one question about the first work that you talked about. So you were more focused on generating captions. I was wondering if you thought about like maybe some of your learnings can be transferred to the scenario of writing alt text, because alt text is often also, a lot of them are pretty bad or just completely missing. Just wondering what your thoughts about that.
Yeah, I mean, I believe our our work can actually apply to the alternative tags, but I also kind of believe that some of the information is missing from our current framework. For example, the data point is probably also very important to generate the alternative tags, right? So I think at least we will probably need to gather the data point, like the data tables. I mean, those are the basically the numbers of the point, or like basically detailed information about the figures. And I think those are kind of essential for the to generate the alternative tags. Yeah, but yeah, I mean, I do believe it is also possible to do that. And yeah, and the other question is probably how can we actually collect like the good data for to train the models, right? And I mean, right now the captions are, I mean, a lot of captions are really bad, and I believe, I mean, the problem will be more severe if we want to collect data for alternative tags. So I think that's the basically the second layer of the difficulty we need to handle.
I see. Thanks. Do you have any other questions? Pao, go ahead.
I have a question. So actually, this is related to some of the future direction that you're thinking about exploring for scientific writing. So if we don't think about writing as just like the end product of the process, because sometimes you can also use writing as a tool to help clarify your thought or explore possibility, right?
Yeah.
Have you thought about using like what kind of system, what kind of interaction for writing in that phase? Would be like let's say you are writing journal, or you're thinking about framing for your experiment or the study, like the writing that is not the end product as a paper, but help form your thinking in a way.
You mean like to clarify some of your thought, basically?
Something like that. Is that have you thinking about what actually for scientific writing in particular? Is there any support that you think might be interesting to look at?
Yeah, I think, yeah, I mean, if we have like a lot of data for this, we can, I mean, of course, we can actually learn a lot of things from the prior work, right? So what you are doing right now is like probably there are some other relevant tasks. So I mean, by training a large language model for that, I believe we can kind of provide some of the feedback for like everything you did, like what is the framing, like language models can probably discuss with you, right? But I mean, I would actually say like right now, I mean, there are still a lot of problems for language models, right? So probably language model cannot actually provide you with the like high quality feedback in this case. But so I would say like the problem is like when the language models actually still provide a lot of like bad suggestions, will that still be helpful for people to clarify their thought? Yeah, and I believe sometimes this can be true, right? Sometimes when you try to talk to somebody, or to try to talk to your families, I mean, they don't really know about the domain you are working on, but sometimes you can still get some feedback from them, and when you talk to them, you are also trying to clarify your thought, and sometimes you will get benefit from that. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Do you have any other questions? Okay. If not, let's thank Jae-young again for the great talk, and thanks for visiting us. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much.